when knowledge is diffused and virtue is preserved. He said, on the contrary, when the people become universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, they will sink underneath their own weight without the aid of foreign invaders. And if we're totally honest, we have lost more liberty in the last 6 months at our own hand than we have lost in the last 60 years from foreign invaders. And I can tell you, you can either take my word for it or challenge me on it. I would love to have somebody challenge me on it, because I'm not here to teach you what to think. I'm here to teach you how to think. Because I'm confident in what I'm going to give you. You challenge me, you're going to come to the same conclusions I've come to. That the reason we're in this election mess is because we've been taught the wrong things for a really long time. And if we had been operating the way our founders intended us to operate for at least the last 70 years, we wouldn't have presidential elections hanging on a thread. We wouldn't be that way. But I am always hopeful. I know history, so I know things move in cycles, and I realize that people don't know what they don't know. And how many of you have made some really stupid mistakes in your life? Right? Well, with those really stupid mistakes, do you realize that those were the most powerful lessons you learned? Well, we've made some mistakes. So we have some lessons to learn. And I want to help you with that today. We have a constitution in crisis today. May I say to you, we have constitutions in crisis today.
Right.
How many of you have a pocket constitution? I'm assuming when everybody raises their hand, they have a pocket U.S. Constitution, right?
Yes.
How many of you have a pocket Florida Constitution? Now you know problem number one. For a very long time, our education, our interest, our attention, our resources have been focused on Emerald City. We have become so federally obsessed that we have ignored our state and local governments, and that's why we are where we are today.
Yeah.
This presidential election is in a mess, not because we have a federal problem, but because we have a local problem. Elections are not federal issues. They are state issues. And so I want to teach you a few things this evening. And first, I'm a very proud person tonight. I would like, I'm actually a professor at River University at the River School of Government. And I have my River School of Government students with me today. Everybody stand up. Look, these are your future leaders of America. And they are being taught how it's supposed to work. How to restore our constitutional republic. And that sometimes standing, should I rephrase that? All the time standing for principle is more important than going along to get along. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Yeah, we know.
All right, so there's a couple things that I want to share with you today. We're going to start off from a federal perspective, then we're going to bring it home to a state perspective. Because there's a lot of misinformation floating around, and I want to take just a few short minutes to explain to you how the presidential election is supposed to work. There are constitutional provisions that tell us how the President of the United States is elected. And when you're wondering about a federal office, the first place that you go to is where, students? The Constitution, right? Can the President do this? Look at the Constitution. You don't go to Fox News experts, okay? You certainly don't go to CNN experts. And you shouldn't run to your political parties for understanding on this either. Hey, if you guys want to bring some chairs up front, there's plenty of space up here if we have more chairs. Or if you're rather nimble, you can come sit on the floor. I'm good with that too. But if we're talking about a presidential election, here's what you need to do. Article 2 is where you find presidential issues. So you want Article 2, Section 1, Clauses 2 and 3, the 12th Amendment, the 20th Amendment, and the 25th Amendment. Now let me explain to you how this works. Article 2, Section 1, Clauses 2 and 3 set up how the president is elected. Now, it's frustrating to me, all the turmoil that we're in, because we have been trained into believing that this popular vote thing is how we elect presidents. The popular vote is not how presidents are elected. Article 2 establishes that the president is elected by an electoral college. So why do we have a popular vote? The popular vote is to guide the electoral college on how to cast their ballots. Now what's interesting is the vote for the President of the United States hasn't even taken place yet. The vote that matters for the President of the United States does not take place until the mid of December. That's when the electors of the state cast their vote for their president. Now, one might ask, why do we have electors cast votes instead of a popular vote? Well, number one, try not to be too shocked. The President of the United States is not a representative of the people. The President of the United States does not represent the people of America. The President of the United States represents the states. The purpose for creating the President of the United States was to be an ambassador on behalf of the states in foreign affairs. And all you have to do is look at Article 2 and see the power that's delegated to the President. Number one, there is hardly any autonomous power delegated to the President at all. Everything except for two things that the President has authorized power to do is done with the consent of the Senate. He can't do anything except issue pardons for federal offenses and give State of the Union addresses. Everything else is done with the consent of the Senate or at the direction of Congress as a whole. The President has no power delegated to him to directly touch the lives of the people. The President does not raise or lower taxes. That's the House of Representatives. The President is only the commander-in-chief of the military when Congress has a formal declaration of war. Anybody know the last time we had a formal declaration of war?
72.
World War II. There have been no formal declarations of war since World War II. Therefore, the President of the United States constitutionally is not the commander-in-chief. The President can't even issue sanctions or tariffs without Congress. The President is the to faithfully enforce the laws. It is not his job to make them. So all these things that bring people to the ballot box to elect a president in a popular vote are all false. Because the president does not constitutionally hold that authority. By the way, that's why you have a House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is designed to be your representative. The Senate is designed to be the representative of the states. Together, the houses work to represent the people and the states together in making laws and establishing foreign policy. It's just the president's job to execute them. So knowing that the president is the ambassador, knowing the power that's delegated to the president, we can now understand why the president is not elected by popular vote. Because he is not a representative of the people. He is elected by an electoral college, which are representatives of the states, to choose the president that best matches their state's principles and ideologies. Part of our problem currently with the Electoral College is that our Electoral College doesn't operate the way it's supposed to be intended. The Electoral College is built in such a way that each state has 2 electors for each senator, right? Every state has 2 senators. And then they get the same number of additional electors as they do representatives in the House of Representatives. So each district, House district within your state gets 1 elector. So when you cast the popular vote, the way it's supposed to work is that the elector is supposed to look at the popular vote from the district, not from the state, and choose the candidate that matches what the district wants. The states who have an electoral college law where the winner takes all are completely contrary to the intent of our Constitution and the creation of the Electoral College. Now there's a video floating around. Some guy driving his car wants to educate you on this nifty little trick about how the President Trump can stay in office. He's not telling you the truth. That video is not truth. As a matter of fact, that truth. Anybody here know who Van Jones is? That message came from Van Jones. Van Jones planted a subversive seed into the airways. Do you think Van Jones likes Donald Trump? No. Do you think Van Jones wants Donald Trump to stay in office? No. So why would Van Jones be truthful about a legal mechanism to keep Donald Trump in office? He would not. It was a subversion plant, an operation to mislead the conservative Trump supporters into believing that something isn't true, something that isn't true. What would be the power of making people believe something that isn't true? When it doesn't come true and all your hope is placed in that, then you're psychologically defeated, and that's all that it takes. So the only way that the President of the United States is chosen by the House and the Senate is if there is a tie in the Electoral College vote, or if for some reason we get to the point where the President is selected and he does not qualify for office. There is no legal constitutional way to have a delay in electing the president. Why? Because the date to count the vote is set by law. Now remember, what count votes when you're electing a president? The Electoral College. That vote does not take place till the middle of December. By law, when that vote is taken, the states certify the electors' votes. They send a copy of the certificate to the Senate President and a copy to the Library of Congress archive. On January 6th, the Senate President, in front of the Senate and the House, cracks the seal on the certifications and counts the electors' votes. It is set by law. It cannot change. There cannot be a delay. The votes that are there on January 6th are counted, and the votes that don't get there by January 6th are not counted. So the electors either get their votes in on time or they're not counted.
Amen.
And that's the law.
Right.
There is no opportunity for delay. And Congress doesn't get to elect the president, select the president, if the president refuses to concede. Concession is not required by the Constitution. It's not required. And in spite of what that video might tell you, no president has ever refused to concede. That is another of that false information. Some of them have sort of drugged their feet. John Adams was not real crazy about conceding to Thomas Jefferson, but he did do it. And by the way, that election between Jefferson and Adams is why we got the 12th Amendment, which establishes how a tie is broken. So concession does not keep the president in office. On January 20th, by Constitution, the term of the president is up. The only way that changes is if you amend the Constitution. So on January 20th, no matter who is president, that person will either be re-sworn in for another term, leave office because he's been replaced, or be subject to arrest for trespass. By the way, there's this little principle, I was going to say in law, but I guess in life. Be careful of the rules that you create for the ones that you like, because those rules will be applied to those you don't like. You want to establish a precedent that the president that you like can stay in office after January 20th? Then you better be prepared for Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton or Ocasio-Cortez or Mr. Buttigieg to remain president. It is important that we follow the Constitution.
Amen.
It is important that we follow the laws that are made in pursuance to the Constitution. Because any deviation that we give credit to is the one that will come back and bite us. So knowing your Constitution and knowing how it works is step number one. Step number two, having the courage to stand by it is step number two. You must have courage. That's the knowledge and virtue that Samuel Adams was talking about. And in order to have that courage to do the right thing, in order to have that courage to stand up for the rights of the people, for the rights of our future, we must have a foundation in truth and knowledge. Now, how many believe we haven't been teaching our Constitution properly for a very long time?
Amen.
Would you also admit that in not teaching the Constitution, we have also taught wrong things about our Constitution for a very long time?
Yes.
Well, I'm not going to teach this part today, but as one of my professors said, I'll give you a little bonus for your educational dollar. I know the year year we stopped teaching our Constitution properly? It was 1833. So unless you were born before 1833, anybody here?
Several people that voted were born.
Yeah, there you go. So unless you were born before 1833, the education that you've gotten on the Constitution, unless you have made the double effort to learn on your own, is tainted at best. So I would like to suggest to you, as we finish up our little federal section and we move on to the state section, take some time to learn truth about your Constitution. Now, I'm not here to simply teach you everything you need to know. If we've been teaching wrong things for 176 years, I can't possibly do this in an hour. But I do want to tell you that we have set up an entire ministry to disciple. And so we have lots of educational materials, and I guarantee you two things about everything that we teach. Number one, everything that I teach here today and all the time, ask my students, come from original source text. I do not take other people's opinions. I don't even listen to the Supreme Court. How many of you know they don't get it right most of the time?
Yeah, true.
We teach from what the people who wrote and ratified the Constitution taught us. No opinions. Number two, I promise you that I encourage you to challenge me. Because I am confident that when you do, you will come to the same conclusions that I do. Because my conclusions are not based on personality. They're not based on feelings or opinions. In spite of what the progressive Marxists want us to believe, there are absolute truths. And everybody's entitled to opinions, but sometimes opinions are wrong. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
All right. So now let's go on to where do we fix this problem? Just happens to be here. Because federal elections are state issues. If there's something wrong with the election process, we shouldn't be running to Washington, D.C. to fix it. We should be marching on Tallahassee. Right now, we should be in Tallahassee fixing our election system by law so this never happens again. But can I just mention to you, without really offending anybody, I hope, we have bigger fish to fry on the state level. We are a constitutional republic. Now, I don't know if you caught that, but the state of Florida is a constitutional republic. The Constitution requires every state to be a republic. We are a republic. But we are specifically a constitutional republic because the Constitution is the contract of the people that creates the states. We are a constitutional republic because we are not a democracy on purpose. Because we realize that government should never be one size fits all. I don't know if you realize this, but what's my number here? 40% of all the COVID cases in Florida are in 3 counties in South Florida. For the entire state to be burdened with regulations as a response to 3 counties in the state is antithetical, is opposite to a constitutional republic. It is a pure democracy, and that is tyranny. So these orders, these rules, they're not laws, by the way. These orders and these rules and executive orders, whatever they are unconstitutional from the very beginning because they do not follow the principle of a constitutional republic. But remember, I asked you if you had a constitution, but I asked you if you had a Florida constitution. Now, I know you don't have a Florida pocket constitution because you couldn't carry the Florida Constitution in your pockets because it is stupid. Because we have legislators who are lazy. They shirk their responsibility in legislation. They turn everything into a ballot initiative. And we have corrupted our Constitution with amendments for pregnant pigs, high-speed rails, dog racing, and now, God help us, a $15 minimum wage.
Oh my gosh. No.
Everything that I just mentioned to you should be legislative, not constitutional. But that's a different class. We have to understand that every constitution in America, from the federal to the state level, is built on the principle of natural rights. Samuel Adams wrote in 1772, among the natural rights of the colonists are these: first, life, natural right; second, liberty; third, property; together, number 4, with the right to protect and defend them.
Amen.
These are individual personal rights, and every law, to be a just law, must conform to this natural law. We know this to be the foundation of our republic because the Declaration of Independence says so, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their governor with certain inalienable rights. I'm just making sure you guys are still paying attention, right? Because I guarantee you, a classroom with me is like drinking from a fire hose. We want to stay and consume as much as we can. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Now what? Yeah, you know the thing. You know the thing. The thing. But listen, I think we skip over these words. We do not give them the pause their importance requires. I am a dot connector. That's what I do. And I love the basics. You know, the whole Captain Obvious commercial, right? Sometimes we think that's a bad thing. No, Captain Obvious is a great thing. We skip over the details, we miss things. So, how about a pop quiz? Anybody ready for a pop quiz? And my students can't answer it. What year was the Declaration of Independence published?
What is 1776?
1776. All right, 1776. Did we have a federal government July 4th, 1776?
No.
No! You know why? Because we had just kicked off the federal government that we had called the British Empire.
Yeah.
That was the whole purpose, right? So, when our document of July 4th, 1776 was published, we had no federal government. What were the only governments that existed? The states. They stopped being colonies on July 2nd, 1776. The Declaration of Independence was published on July 4th. So we had been states for 2 days. So when the Declaration of Independence says this, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. What were the governments he was talking about most directly? The states. That statement right there, that to secure these rights, tells us the only reason we created states was to secure our rights. Not to create them, not to regulate them, not to define them, not to give them or take them, but to secure them. We created states to secure our natural rights, life, liberty, property, and the right to defend them. But it goes on to say that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. You see, we are a constitutional republic, and our consent comes in the form of a written contract called the Constitution. Government knows the power they are consented to have because we put it in writing. Now, that sentence says they derive their just power from the consent of the governed. The consent comes through the Constitution, which tells us if our government in Tallahassee or in Hillsborough County operates outside the Constitution, they are no longer operating by our consent, and what they're doing is exercising unjust power. Do you see that? Does that make sense? If it's not by consent, it's unjust. The Constitution is our consent. If it's outside the Constitution, it is unjust. So when you're asking, can the governor do? Can the BOCC do? Can the mayor do? You go to where the power is consented. You have to know the Florida Constitution. Now, you don't have to know all of it. But you do have to know Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, Article 4, and Article 5. Now, Article 1 of the Florida Constitution is our Declaration of Rights. Now, what we need to understand is everybody that works in government takes an oath, right? They all take an oath. Do you know we actually, in some places, elect a mosquito person? How crazy is that? We elect mosquito people. And the mosquito person even takes an oath. Let me read to you what the Florida Oath of Office is. Everybody takes this. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution and the government of the United States and of the state of Florida. That I am duly qualified to hold office under the Constitution of the state, and that I will well and faithfully perform the duties of fill in the blank. Now, what's important about a document sometimes is not just the words there. It's the words that are not there. Now, I'm going to read this to you again because I want you to see the words that are not there. I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution and the government of the United States and the state of Florida, meaning the Constitution and the government of the state of Florida. Do you know what's not in there? I do solemnly swear I will enforce the law. No person in the state of Florida takes an oath to the law. Why? Because the Constitution is above the law, And if a law violates the Constitution, they have to enforce the Constitution by not enforcing the law. That's their promise. Notice they didn't make a promise to keep people safe.
Yeah, true. That's true.
They didn't make a promise to keep people healthy.
That's true. Yes.
They didn't make a promise to that you would have a house to live in.
Yeah. Yes.
That you would have a minimum wage.
Yeah.
They made a promise to you, to the Constitution, which is a promise to the people to secure the rights.
Chris Ann, isn't the Constitution a living, breathing document?
That's a different class. So listen to this. Article 1, Section 2. All natural persons, female and male alike, are equal before the law and have inalienable rights, among which are the right to enjoy and defend life and liberty, individual rights, the right to pursue happiness, to be rewarded for industry, and to acquire, possess, and protect property. Did you catch that?
Mm-hmm.
You have an inherent, inalienable right to equal protection under the law, and an inherent, inalienable right to gain from your endeavors and to protect your property, your life, and your liberty. Equal. I want you to notice something. Maybe just, because I'm a lawyer, these things kind of jump out. Look what it says. All natural persons, female and male alike, are equal before the law. Let me explain to you how that works. Walmart and Costco can stay open, but mom and pop have to close. Now that violates Article 1, Section 2 twice. Number 1, if Costco and Walmart can stay open by permission of government, but by threat, mom and pop have to close, that's not equal, is it?
No.
And number 2, mom and pop are natural persons. Costco and Walmart are corporations. They are not natural persons. Right now, one example, 3 violations, and we've only covered 2 segments.
Yeah.
How about Article 1, Section 3? There shall be no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting or penalizing the free exercise thereof. What does that sound like?
Can't close churches.
That sounds like the First Amendment in the U.S. Bill of Rights, right? If I could make a wish, and when I threw my penny in a well, my wish came true. My wish would be that the American people would stop running to the federal government to fix all their problems.
Yeah.
Your Florida Constitution has a better Bill of Rights than the U.S. Constitution has. And if we knew that, we would know that our quickest, most powerful remedy would be at the state level. Because the bottom line is, I don't want to kick anybody's sacred cow, but every time you run to the federal government to fix what is a state issue, you expand the power of the federal government over your life.
Wow.
Now, we in Florida have what I call Religious Freedom 2.0. So we have Article 1, Section 3, but we also have the Florida Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And I want to read this to you. Now, it's got a lot of silly legal words in it that really make me mad, but we're not going to get distracted by that. The government shall not substantially burden a person's exercise of religion, even if the burden results from a rule of general applicability. That's why they say, okay, well, we're applying this on businesses so we can apply it on the church. That's what we call a rule of general applicability. We're doing it secular, equally we'll do it on the church. So because we're doing it secular, we can do it on the church. This act says no, you can't do that. That rule of general applicability does not work. Except that the government may substantially burden a person's exercise of religion only if it demonstrates two things. Number one, it's in the furtherance of a compelling governmental interest. This is where my students, second-year students, groan, because they know how much I hate the compelling governmental interest. And number two is the least restrictive means of furthering that interest. So the only time the government can say, well, we're shutting it down secular, so we are allowed to shut it down religious, is when it's the least restrictive means necessary. The fact that Costco and Walmart can stay open because they're essential, but the church has to close, proves that closing the church is not the least restrictive means necessary because they're doing less for Walmart and Costco.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. I want you to understand that reading and understanding the Constitution is not rocket science. You don't have to be a judge. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be a constitutionalist.
Right.
You just have to put on the part of your brain that thinks. And I don't want to sound ugly, but we don't do that very often. Because we've been brain trained into 140 characters or less. And reading headlines and reacting. Right? Article 1, Section 5. The people shall have the right to peaceably assemble, to instruct their representatives, and to petition for a redress of grievances. This is one of the parts of the Florida Constitution that I like better than the U.S. Bill of Rights. Because our U.S. Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, has 5 liberties in it. We've taken those same 5 liberties and we've broken them into separate sections. And in this case, we have tied the right to peaceably assemble with the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That is huge. Because what that tells us is that our founders recognized that the most powerful check and balance on government, the most powerful influence and control of government is the educated, unified body assembled. When you step up and protest publicly, you do 2 things. Number 1, you show those in government that it's more than one person that believes what you do. And that is powerful. The most powerful. Because remember, even though they don't act like it, they know their job depends on keeping you appeased.
Right.
Number 2, that public assembly, I think the most important thing. It lets us know we are not alone.
Yes.
But think about this. When people in government know that they're about to go contrary to the Constitution, when they're about to go contrary to your rights, how are they going to keep the people from objecting to what they do?
Stimulus checks.
You outlaw public assembly. Because, number 1, the public doesn't see the number of people that disagree, and those in government they're not held accountable, they're not influenced by the massive number of collected people.
Yeah.
But even more powerful, everybody sits at home out of fear. Over exercising what is a natural, inherent right. Not just in my mind, but in your Constitution, a natural, inherent right. Sit at home in fear, wondering, am I the only one that objects?
Wow. Wow.
Because you cannot defeat unless you divide. They keep us divided by fear, not by rational science. There is nothing rational about telling people they can't meet outside in the sun.
Yeah.
Nothing rational about that at all. By the way, I know the critics out there, somebody's out there, well, KrisAnne's a constitutional scholar. She needs to stay in her wheelhouse. Stop talking about the vid. My undergraduate degree is in biochemistry. So it is my wheelhouse. Now let's just be very clear. Robbing TV stores, burning down donut shops are not protests. They are not protests. By the way, the media is in a propaganda position.
Yeah.
And they seed society with words. How many of you believe words have power? They seed the society with words to affect how we think. They say the violent protesters today, there is no such thing as a violent protester. None. If you are violent, you are not a protester, you are a criminal. But by conflating those terms, it creates doubt and confusion in the minds of the people. Oh, a protest. Well, we have a right to protest. How do we know if we should stop them? We can't interfere with their right. Surely they're violent, but we're also calling them protesters. So when do we interfere if they're protesting? No. If they're violent, they're not protesting, they are criminals, and you must enforce the law.
Say that. Say it.
Wow.
Thank God for our governor.
But they conflate those terms. Why? For confusion and because they want social chaos.
True. Yeah. They do.
There used to be a principle in media that everybody knew. If it bleeds, it leads. I think we've kind of forgotten that media makes money off of chaos.
Yes.
Why would they sow chaos? Because they want to be rich.
Yeah. Yes.
That's it. They don't care about us. They care about their bottom line. So what about these stay-at-home orders? Well, I'll probably let the cat out of the bag, but I just simply tell you, pick up a dictionary. What is a quarantine? A quarantine is an isolation of sick and infected people.
Not healthy people.
Healthy people cannot be quarantined.
Come on. Say that.
When you tell healthy people you have to stay home, that is called house arrest. House arrest. And you cannot, by Constitution, be placed on house arrest without due process.
Yes.
Well, let me read to you a 5-4 decision by the Supreme Court. Now, I see people raising their hand. I'm not answering questions today until after the class. We've got way too much to cover, so just put a pin in your question and we'll deal with it later, because quite likely I'm going to answer it as we go along, okay? A 5-4 decision. The court held that the right to travel is an inherent element of liberty that cannot be denied to American citizens. The right to travel is an inherent liberty. Your state constitution says that you have an inherent right not only to your liberty, but to protect and defend your liberty.
Right.
Now, this case was specifically about withholding passports. But we can get even clearer with other cases. This is Lutz v. City of New York. The right to move freely about one's neighborhood or town, even by automobile, is indeed implicit in the concept of ordered liberty and deeply rooted in the nation's history. Here we have Walters v. Berry. And this is my favorite, by the way. The right to walk the streets or to meet publicly with one's friends for a noble purpose or for no purpose at all. And to do so whatever one pleases is an integral component of life in a free and ordered society. So when the governor issues an order, or the mayor issues an order that says you cannot leave your home unless you're engaged in essential activity, that is a violation of your liberty. And your Constitution says you have an inherent right to defend and protect it. Article 1, Section 9. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Due process is required. It's not a suggestion. It's not a consideration. It is a constitutional requirement, and it's the only means by which we have consented to the power government exercises. Article 1, Section 12. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. Now, this is where the Florida Constitution is better than the U.S. Constitution, so listen. And against the unreasonable interception of private communications by any means shall not be violated. And then it defines what reasonableness is. A warrant based upon probable cause, supported by oath, particularly describing what's to be searched and particularly describing what to be seized. Without a warrant, even your data in the state of Florida, even your communications in the state of Florida are secured by right. Notice I keep saying natural right, inherent right, over and over again. Because I want you to hear what the correct language is. Because all too often we talk about constitutional rights. There is not a single person in this room with a constitutional right. There is not a single person in America with a constitutional right. You see, that suffix al means deriving from. Your rights are not derived from the Constitution. The Constitution is derived from your rights. Your rights pre-exist the Constitution, and the only reason the Constitution exists is to secure your rights.
Yes.
So we have to stop speaking these words that simply go contrary to our rights. Article 10, Section 6. No private property shall be taken except for public purpose, and with full compensation therefore paid to each owner, or secured by deposit in the registry of the court and available to the owner. How many of our businesses that were shut down by governor or local government order got just compensation before they were shut down? How many of these businesses were seized with a lawful warrant? How many of these businesses were ordered to close after full due process? A right to a trial by jury of your peers is another section of your Constitution. our businesses are being taken from us by government with zero due process. They are violating, when the governor or a county orders your business to be closed, they are violating at least 5 sections of our state constitution. Now, I have been teaching this all over the country. I have looked at state constitutions all throughout the United States. Some are better than others. Some are not good at all. Surprisingly enough, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but Florida's on the bottom, under California. California actually has a better constitution. The problem is nobody follows it. But here we are, with our written consent, and government operating contrary to our consent, which means the power they exercise is unjust. Now, I taught this, and there just happened to be a state legislator in the audience. And he was not happy. He came to me after the meeting and said to me, "KrisAnne, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. What a disingenuous presentation of our Constitution and law." I said, "Well, that's kind of interesting because really all I did was read it." I said, "But so tell me, because I'm open to be corrected. I'm not a politician or a law professor, so I don't think that I'm unquestionable. And I certainly want to be right. So where did I get it wrong? The government is not taking those people's property. You see, we're in a pandemic, and we have to keep people safe. And we're not taking it, we're just telling them they have to temporarily close. And because it's just temporary, it's not a taking. And you should know that, KrisAnne, you studied the law." I said, "Oh, okay, that's really interesting." I said, "So what you're telling me, and maybe I missed this segment in law school, that when the government takes something from you and it's temporary, they promise to give it back to you later, it's not actually a taking." "That's right, and you should know it." I was like, "Okay, what's your address?" He said, what do you mean?" I said, "Where do you live?" He said, "Why do you need to know my address?" I said, "Well, because I have this real emergency and I need a car. And by your definition, I can come to your house and seize your car. I promise that I'll give it back later. So while I'm out driving around in your car, you can't report it stolen because I didn't take it. I promise to bring it back. Now, I don't know when I'll bring it back, but I do promise that I'll bring it back, and by your definition, I'm not taking it." He was not happy? Not happy at all? "Well, that's not what I mean." And then walks off, right? Because they never, finish the arguments.
Because he's a Democrat.
No, he wasn't. No, he was not a Democrat. But I want to read to you another court case controlling in our district. The right to hold specific private employment and to follow chosen profession free from unreasonable governmental interference comes within both the liberty and property concepts of the 5th and 14th Amendments, which, by the way, those property concepts you have written even better in your Florida Constitution. It is not reasonable for the government to say this corporation can stay open, but your private business has to close. That is the very definition of arbitrary, capricious, and unreasonable. And it violates our rights and our Constitution. Article 1, Section 18. This is something that's in the Florida Constitution that's not in others. which is one of the good things. No administrative agency, except the Department of Military Affairs, in an appropriately convened court-martial action as provided by law, shall impose a sentence of imprisonment, nor shall it impose any other penalty except as provided by law. When your health department says you have to wear a mask or you're going to be charged with a misdemeanor, they are violating the Florida Constitution. Contact tracing. Let me teach you about contact tracing, some things that I know you don't know. Now, we are very active at River University in local politics. So the moment that this stuff came down from the Hillsborough EPG, I was on every single virtual meeting. I heard everything that they said, much to my... Anyway.
Lots of wine.
I know how they contact trace in the state of Florida. There are two ways that contact tracing takes place in the state of Florida. Number one, geo-tracking your cell phone. That's number one method by which contact tracing takes place. Now what's interesting is the U.S. Supreme Court says that tracing is expressly unconstitutional without a warrant. A warrant for every single cell phone. So in order to legally contact trace you, they must have a warrant for every cell phone that is contact traced. Or they must have your permission. They don't need a warrant if they have your permission. You know how they get your permission? When you take the COVID test, you give them permission to contact trace you. It doesn't matter if you turn off that little app on your phone or you opt out. To be honest with you, when I was in the Army, my husband and I were military intelligence. It doesn't even matter if your phone is turned off. They can contact trace you with your phone off. They can contact trace you with the battery not in it if it still has the SIM card in it. So once you consent, you have no complaint because you voluntarily gave up your rights.
Is that in a form?
It is in the form that you signed when you took the test.
What if you took it, not through the government, through your own doctor, or private?
They have a contract. All the COVID testing has a contract with the doctors and the hospitals. Every form is the same because they all come from the same place. Now do you know why? Yes, even through your job. Now you know why they want everybody tested so they never have to have a warrant again.
Can you take that right back?
Nope. Cannot take it back. It doesn't matter about contract law. This is different.
Is there a time limitation?
Nope. Not as it's written now. If you want a time limitation, you're going to have to challenge it.
So Violet, can't you just say, no, I'm not signing that provision, that, exit out?
You can exit out. You can exit out, but that leaves you the option to challenge it. It doesn't stop them from doing it. Okay? Number 2, contact tracing. Infrared technology. They have cameras. They can drive by your house, shoot an infrared camera at your house. They can see the number of people in your building. I mean, you look like red cylinders. So they can count the people and know how close together they're standing. We have drones in Hillsborough with infrared technology. We do. And another Supreme Court case, which is Kylo v. U.S., says no infrared technology, no infrared searches without a warrant for every home, for every person. Unless you gave permission.
So does that include people in the house? Like if you have one member who did, then they can trace everything?
Yes. Because infrared can now, the contact tracing can be attached to the owner of the home. Now, when they leave the home, they can't legally be traced. But in your home, they can. How many of you are aware that Florida statute says that the state health officer may use any means necessary to vaccinate an individual in the state of Florida?
Say that again.
Florida statute 381.00315 subsection 4B. If the individual poses a danger to the public health, even if in the previous section you have asserted a religious exemption, the state health officer may subject the individual to isolation or quarantine. If there is no practical method, who gets to define what's practical? If there is no practical method to isolate or quarantine the individual, the state health officer may use any means necessary to vaccinate or treat the individual.
Even on your own property.
Since 1992. And that's the law in the state of Florida. Yes. 381.00315. Subsection 4B. Now let me explain to you one last provision and I'll tell you how to fix it. Separation of powers. This is important. Separation of powers. We're talking about governors issuing executive orders. We're talking about mayors issuing executive orders. Listen to this. Article 2, Section 3. The powers of the state government shall be divided into legislative and executive and judicial branches. No person belonging to one branch shall exercise any powers appertaining to either of the other branches unless expressly provided herein. So unless the Constitution says so, the legislative branch legislates, the executive branch executes. Article 3, Section 1, the legislative power of the state shall be vested in the legislature. Law-making is reserved to the legislative branch. Article 4, Section 1, the supreme executive power shall be vested in the governor. The governor does not have authority to issue orders and expect them to be enforced as law. That is a violation of the separation of powers clause. And James Madison, how many of you ever heard of that guy? Said that's the most violent attack on liberty. Why? Because when the executive also has lawmaking power, he is now a king. Our governor's orders to shut down businesses, to make you wear masks, to put you on curfew, to do whatever, enforced as law, are violations of your Constitution, which makes them no law at all. Woo.
So statute 252 violates the Constitution.
The Emergency Powers Act violates the Constitution.
What happens if you're in a state of emergency?
There's no, the state, okay, here, let me read this to you.
Yeah.
All right, let me read this to you. Are you ready?
What's the
Oh,
site?
wait, it's coming. Hurry up.
What's the site?
Hold on. Then the state of emergency powers. The power of state of emergency is an unconstitutional power. Why? Because you have the legislative branch expanding the power of the executive branch beyond the Constitution. The legislative branch cannot constitutionally expand executive power without amending the Constitution. It takes a constitutional amendment. So if you suppose that the legislative branch can expand executive power, you must also suppose that the legislative branch can take power from the governor. And now you have the executive and the legislative in one body, and instead of a king, you have an oligarchy. Let me read this to you. The Constitution was adopted in a period of grave emergency, the Supreme Court wrote in 1934. Its grants of power to the federal government and its limitations of power of the states were determined in light of emergency, and they are not altered by emergency. So what is the solution? James Wilson says this in principle. The power of the Constitution predominates. Anything, therefore, that shall be enacted by the legislative branch contrary thereto will not have the force of law. A law only has the force of law if it's made in pursuance to the Constitution. Because if it's not, then you have a Constitution that created a legislative branch who has now become superior to its creator.
Wow.
And then what's the limit to legislative power if it's not the Constitution that created them? None. We live in a banana republic. The solution has to be, are you ready? It's very simple. Now notice I didn't say it was easy, but it is simple. The solution is peaceful non-compliance. We must refuse to comply. Now, peaceful non-compliance is not us violating a law, because these laws are not laws. They're contrary to our Constitution. They can't even be legally written constitutionally written by the governor. They can't be constitutionally written by anybody but Tallahassee. And even if Tallahassee writes them, if they're not made consistent with Article 1, the Declaration of Our Rights, then they're not lawful either. They do not have the force of law. If something does not have the force of law because it's made outside your consent, right? Yeah. The Constitution is your consent. Made outside your consent is outside the Constitution. What obligation do you have as an individual or a community to submit to something that is not lawfully made?
Zero.
Just this one. Just this one. The one you impose on yourself. And if we are honest, not a single church shut down in the state of Florida by governor order.
Amen.
Not a single business shut down by governor order. Not a single person stayed home by county order. Every single person did those things by choice.
Yeah.
Fear made people choose to not enforce their rights. And that's why the virtue is necessary. Virtue is courage. And we must have the courage to do what's right. America was founded by people who were threatened with jail. They were threatened with the seizure of their businesses, of their homes, of their property, of their lives. They did what was right. They did what was necessary to secure our rights in spite of the threats, because they knew there was a more righteous and greater power and a more righteous and greater responsibility. Peaceful non-compliance is not us breaking the law. Peaceful non-compliance is actually us enforcing the law because the government is breaking our consent. How does it work? How does peaceful noncompliance work? Number one, your greatest friend in peaceful noncompliance is your sheriff. Your sheriff has a constitutional obligation to secure your rights. Your sheriff does not have a constitutional obligation to enforce the law. Any sheriff, and I don't know if everybody's here from Hillsborough, so I'll say any sheriff in any county in America who comes to you and says, I had to violate somebody's rights because the law said so, is an unconstitutional and woefully ignorant sheriff. And indication you need a new sheriff. So your sheriff should be standing at your church door saying, nobody's shutting down this church. Your sheriff and his deputies should be standing outside the business and saying, nobody is shutting down this business. Not the mayor, not the health department, not anybody. Nobody is shutting this down. That's the purpose of the sheriff, and it's been the purpose of the sheriff since 1215. The other power in peaceful noncompliance is you. It has to be an individual choice, but we must come together as communities. If the health department says, you have to do this or we're going to shut you down. So what? We don't care. You didn't start this business. I did. You don't own this business. You didn't give it. You can't take it.
Amen.
It's mine.
Yes. Amen.
Well, we'll shut off your power. Fine. I don't need government power. My community will bring me generators. We'll turn off your water. Fine, I don't need government water. My community will bring us water. We will stay open as a community. And that's how peaceful noncompliance works. But it takes unity in liberty. But no people will tamely surrender their liberties nor be easily subdued when knowledge is diffused and virtue is preserved. But on the contrary, when the people become universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, they will sink underneath their own weight without the aid of foreign invaders. How many of you learned something you didn't know before you came here tonight? How many of you feel empowered by what you learned? Okay, so if you leave that power here, Sam Adams, if you leave that power here, nothing changes out there. You must be committed to never shut down again. And there's 4 magic words you need to make your own. We will not comply. Let's try and say it together. Ready? We will not comply. One more time. We will not comply. Again. We will not comply. Woo! Doesn't that feel awesome? That's what the inherent spirit of liberty feels like inside of you. And that's the power you hold when we stand together in unity, in the liberty that God has given us. Government can't take what it didn't give. And it didn't give me life, it didn't give me liberty, and it didn't give me my business, and I'm not going to let them take it anymore.
Yes.
Thank you so much for letting us come.
I love it. Awesome. Thank you.
We have, my husband's back there, he's going to make his way up here. My assistant, Sonny, is going to be up here. We have lots of stuff to help you disciple. We have DVDs, we have books. Please come and take the leadership boot camp. How many of you think you need to know more about how government works? Look, let me tell you about this. 3 days, December 3rd, 4th, and 5th, right. I was just making sure I started off right. December 3rd, 4th, and 5th. 24 hours. of world-class training. Leadership Institute's flying people in from all over the country. JC and I will be teaching there. 24 hours of world-class training. 4 executive meals. We're not asking Chick-fil-A to bring in sandwiches. These are executive level meals, 4 of them. And if you register by Friday, it's $100 per person. If you register by Friday, you get an early bird discount of $50 because the original price is $200 a head. You get an early bird discount of $50. If you take one of these flyers, there's a coupon code on it that gets you another $50 off. The meals alone are going to be worth $100, but the education will be priceless. And we are so happy to be, the River School of Government is so happy to be combining with and hosting the Political Leadership Boot Camp. Now, how many of you think we should be teaching this in the schools?
Yes.
How many of you think your sheriff needs to hear this message? Okay?
How do we teach the sheriff that message? That's the question.
Yeah.
Electing the right one to be
Here,
with.
how many of you have other groups and churches that need to know about liberty? Okay.
Yeah.
What we do, we have no speaking fees. For 11 years, we have traveled 260 classes over 22 states with no speaking fees. That means all you have to do is ask us to come. We work solely off donation, like a ministry, and off of what when we share, right? When we share experience with you through the books and DVDs, all of that stuff comes back and funds what we do.
Right.
Like I told you in the beginning, we want to disciple. I didn't come here just to make you smarter today. I came here to make you active for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you what, I have a 14-year-old boy that I want to be free. And I need every one of you to help me do that.
Amen.
God bless you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.